Welcome to the Thought Decoder channel. My name is Sean Mixon. I'm a trained philosopher who uses my skills in logic and argumentation to help discuss social issues, to discuss ideas about God and Christianity. Uh, my favorite quote is that the unexamined life is not worth living. So here at Thought Decoder, we try to examine everything. No topic is off uh, the table for discussion. We're not afraid to discuss anything, but we discuss it logically and we look at the arguments and the reasons why we have to believe and have certain conclusions. So today we are in lesson 2 of the basic components of an argument. Last time we discussed statements. This week we're going to discuss truth. So at the end of today's lesson, I'll shoot up some questions on the screen. These questions are actually from the book on argumentation and logic that I'm currently writing, and these questions will be practice questions. So first, let's discuss what is the application of truth. Why is it important? Specifically, looking at objective versus subjective statements. The distinction between objective and subjective statements is a useful conceptual tool. When one knows that information is being presented in a way that reflects a personal attitude, they are able to focus on those facts that are given and decide for themselves whether the attitude taken by the speaker is necessary. News outlets constantly present information from a certain disposition or attitude. Those who follow these outlets frequently accept such news as an objective account of the facts without an apparent awareness of the positions, both politically and ideologically, of these outlets. Further, it's more difficult to think critically about information offered to you when you agree with it. By having a watchful eye and sharp mind for these distinctions, you will be able to reduce this tendency. A very large portion of communication between human beings is filled with subjective statements. These are often largely dependent on a person's attitude. This isn't to say that they are false. Remember, minds are a part of reality. Thus, there are facts about the mind. The problem is that such subjective statements often appear in the close of objective ones. Close. Someone might state that cake is disgusting. By all appearances, this resembles a statement about cakes. But the truth is that the statement is relative to some mind or person who has the said attitude. In evaluating arguments, subjective statements need to be identified and placed into your blueprint of the argument to really see its form. Since subjective and objective statements have distinct criteria for validation, it helps knowing the differences between them. Only when you know what kind of statements is being made can you identify the relevant evidence. So let's talk. Here's the instruction. Here's the lesson. In the above quote, and let's read that quote. Truth, lesson 2. To say of what is that it is not, or of what is not that it is false. While to say of what is that it is, and what is not that it is not, is true. Aristotle, Metaphysics, 1011b25. In the above quote, Aristotle, a famous philosopher, indicates two things about truth that we have already indicated. Truth is about saying the right thing about some subject. Thus, truth implies a subject and a predicate. The predicate is what you say about it. Further, the right thing will reflect what is, according to Aristotle. The wrong thing will not reflect what is. The view that truth is a quality of statements that accurately attach or correspond to reality is called the correspondence theory of truth. For any statement, if the statement predicates a property of a subject, that the subject in fact has, had, or will have in reality, then that statement is true. For example, John is 6 feet tall. The subject is John. He's said to have the property of being 6 feet tall. But who is John? This is a common name, right? But how do we know which John is meant by the above statement? We know intuitively that the subject refers to a John, even if we don't know which John. Subjects of statements usually have reference. A referent is the individual or thing or person the subject refers to. We may not know the referent of a statement, but truth isn't knowledge. We can only know what is true, but we can also fail to know the truth as well. We must therefore distinguish how we know what is true from the fact that a certain statement is true. Statements can be objective or subjective. And I probably can explain it a little better. So John is 6 feet tall. Even if I don't know what John that's referring to, if the John that the sentence was referring to is 6 feet tall, then it's true, whether I know John or not. So the truth is a matter of fact, right? But this idea of reference is very interesting because it kind of implies like intentionality, like what you intend, who or what you intend to refer to. Okay. So statements can be objective or subjective. I had to tell my kids to quiet. Now, a statement is subjective if the truth of the statement is determined by attitude or belief, right? And that those are dependent on a particular person, someone's attitude, someone's belief. Since attitudes and beliefs are dependent on a personal subject, such statements are called subjective. For example, chocolate cake is delicious. Example 3. Here we see that the subject of the sentence is chocolate cake. The referent isn't to an individual chocolate cake, but to all chocolate cakes. Certain words indicate a particular attitude. An attitude is a mental state. These are positive, commonly associated with what is efficient, moral, or pleasing, and a mental state can be negative as well, associated with what is inefficient, immoral, or displeasing. So let's say I see a sunny sky and I say that the sky is beautiful today. That means that it's pleasing, the sky is pleasing to my sense of sight, right? If I say the chocolate cake is delicious, that means it's pleasing to my sense of taste, right? But it's all dependent on my disposition towards the cake, right? Those statements. The word delicious indicates a positive attitude toward cake. Further, it suggests that cake is pleasing to one's sense of taste. But since subjective statements imply an attitude, and an attitude implies a subject, we know that the truth of this statement is depending on a subject. Thus, the statement is subjective. Many people equate subjectivity with an opinion and an opinion with what isn't true or not a fact. However, subjective statements can be true since they express a fact about a person's mental state. Further, either a person has the said mental state or they don't. If John asserted chocolate cake is delicious, then we can translate this subjective statement into an objective one. John believed chocolate cake is delicious. Okay, so now that statement does not look as its dependency on John's attitude or disposition, which I'll use the word disposition. His disposition, his mindset is clearly indicated in example 4. John believes chocolate cake is delicious. We clearly know that this statement is about John now, as opposed to chocolate cake is delicious. And we know that it's about John's beliefs. And we know what the content of that belief is. So example 4 clearly and explicitly displays the correct referent of the example 3, which was about chocolate cake. Example 4 is about John. In this case, it is the person who asserts the subjective statement, that is John. It is either true or false that John has the belief in example 4. John believes chocolate cake is delicious. That's either true or false that John has that belief. John is the subject. Since truth is when we correctly describe subjects in reality, it follows that it's either a true or false sentence. Subjective statements, then, contrary to popular thought, can have truth value. That is, they can be true or false. One possible source of confusion is to interpret the term world as that which is independent of mental states. But this is entirely unnecessary. Like when they say John is a part of the world, and presumably so are his mental states. So the problem is when we think of the world as the objective world, as something that is separate from minds, right? But minds are a part of the world. We are in the world, right? We have our feelings and our ideas and attitudes because of the world. There's a cause and effect relationship between minds and reality. Okay, and both are a part of reality, and both were observed. We all observe our own mind more clearly than the world itself. You know, in some senses, our minds kind of interpret events in ways that, if you're a skeptical person, you can be like, is that really what's going on? Is that just my mind telling me that this is the way things are looking or happening, and this is what they mean? So the mind is in some sense first to us. It's present with us. It interprets the world and responds to it. And when we sleep, it still gives us dreams and things like that, which is not really interpreting the world, but it's creating the world in our dreams. But I diverge, but let's continue. One possible source of confusion is to interpret the term world as that which is independent of mental states. But this is entirely unnecessary. John is a part of the world, and presumably so are his mental states. Thus, the idea that if there are no mental facts, then the mind isn't a part of the world is false. But it's simply an unjustified assumption that a person's mental attitudes and beliefs are not a part of the world. Notice, we don't mean that the world is the planet Earth, but we mean that the world includes all that exists. In this sense, God is a member of the world. The world is a class, and every class has members. Further mental states exist. Thus, the mind is a part of the world. Consequently, there are mental facts. It is important then not to present a false dichotomy between fact and opinion, as if what is related to the mind can have no association with facts. Okay. But this is exactly what children are taught in schools all across America. There are facts and there are opinions. A fact it is claimed can be proven, but an opinion cannot. Hence, when we describe facts about the world, these facts can be about our own mental states or those of others or individuals, groups, or classes. Objective statements are classified by their potential to be demonstrated, deduced, inferred by observation, or the best explanation of data. Scientific hypotheses are supported through empirical evidence. Mathematics offers proofs for their theorems. Philosophers often attempt to provide deductive proofs for their conclusions about metaphysics, knowledge, or ethics. Often their conclusions are open to evaluation by anyone who can observe the data, critique the argument, or assess the hypothesis in terms of the argument to the best explanation. Objective statements are very often publicly evaluable. The statement John believes cake is delicious isn't publicly evaluable. We need John's testimony. If John isn't around and has left no biographical evidence of this claim, then we couldn't know. This subjective statement isn't publicly evaluable since it depends only on John's inaccessible attitude. Example 2, John is 6 feet tall. Example 2 can be inferred by observing John's height with the stadiometer. Okay. Thus, example 2 is an objective statement. All right, so at this time, we're going to transition to practice. Okay. So with what you're looking at here, what I want you to do as we go to practice, the directions are this. In the following examples, identify the sentences as subjective or objective. Remember, subjective means mind dependent. It depends on the person's attitude or perspective. Objective means mind independent. People who don't share the same perspective can evaluate the same evidence, okay, for argument. That's an objective statement. So let's look at this. And I will tell you when to pause. I'll read, you pause the video and select your answer. And then at the end, we will go back over the answers. Number 1, when she converted, her mom told her that she would kill her. Pause the video. Number 2, the universe began to exist. Pause. Number 3, there are no things that don't exist. Pause. Number 4, Michael Jordan is the best basketball player of all time. Pause. Number 5, the idea of a God that punishes people with eternal torment is inherently evil. Pause. There are many paths to what we call God. Pause. 7, Jesus is the only way to God. Pause. The Middle Eastern culture and context of Christ is something that the Western church seems happy to forget. Pause. Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury and head of the Church of England, has said the church should reconsider its portrayal of Jesus as a white man. Pause. Number 10, we do have some lines that nobody in their entertainment industry should cross, and that's our opinion. Pause. Okay, so we hope you've watched, listened to the questions, wrote down your answers, and now we're going to review. Number one, when she converted, her mom told her that she would kill her. Is that a subjective statement or an objective statement? The answer is B, objective. You can observe that. You can hear that to prove that. That's a statement that is that it's admits of observation. Number two, the universe began to exist. Answer is B. It's an objective statement. Now notice that objective and subjective doesn't mean the statement is true or not. It just means how would you verify it? Okay. 3, there are no things that don't exist. B, it's an objective statement. You can verify that through a philosophical argument. Alvin Plantinga has actually argued for this. Number 4, Michael Jordan is the best basketball player of all time. 4 is a subjective statement. The word best refers to an attitude or a perspective or disposition towards Michael Jordan. And that refers back to a particular person or subject. Number 5, the idea of a God that punished people with eternal torment is inherently evil. Answer is A, that's a subjective statement. Okay, what is evil? It's a source of sorrow. So source of sorrow to who? That depends on a person's mind, perspective, disposition. Subjective statement. There are many paths to what we call God. Okay, that's an objective statement. It looks like a person's opinion, but assume it was true. Could we prove it by observation or argument? We could in theory. So that's a philosophical point of view, perspective, but it's an objective statement. Jesus is the only way to God. B, that's another objective statement. If it's in fact true and you can observe it or argue for that truth on the basis of other facts, then that statement is open to evaluation by something other than a person's mind or opinion. So that would make that an objective statement. Kind of tricky, but it's open to debate. Number 8, the Middle Eastern culture and context of Christ is something that the Western church seems happy to forget. The answer is A. The word seems there indicates a certain attitude, disposition, or perspective. Number 9, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury and head of the Church of England, has said the church should reconsider its portrayal of Jesus as a white man. That's a B, an objective statement. You can prove that through observation. If he said it, you could prove it in theory. Number 10, we do have some lines that nobody in the entertainment industry should cross, and that's our opinion. A, that's a subjective statement. The person is claiming to have some lines, but that would depend on the individual people and whether or not they actually had those lines to cross. So that's a fact about a person's subjective point of view. So let's wrap things up. So we hope you've enjoyed this lesson today over truth. Truth is a matter of statements. It's a property of statements when statements reflect the way things are in reality. And you have two types of statements. Objective statements can be verified apart from someone's individual attitude, beliefs, or preferences. Subjective statements can only be verified in accordance with knowing something about a person's mental states. And finally, the opposite of a fact is not an opinion. The opposite of a fact is something that is false. A fact is something that is true and can be verified. But since we have proven that we can verify mental states, we can, through testimony, we can also verify objective statements through observation, through argumentation, and through proof. So thanks for watching. Hope you get something from this video, and hope you were able to do your practice. Stay tuned for the next to come. Thank you.